Hi everyone. Welcome to Life Story. Today, I'm excited to share a new story with you. Late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawn of the Bennett estate as Dr. Thomas Bennett's Mercedes purred up the winding driveway. Something felt off. The security panel displayed unexpected movement at the front gate. Visitors usually called ahead, especially given the estate's secluded location on the outskirts of Boston's most exclusive suburb. Another lost tourist with a malfunctioning GPS, Thomas muttered, running his fingers through his salt and pepper hair. At 42, he still maintained the sharp, focused demeanor that made him one of the East Coast's most sought-after surgeons. I really need to install those surveillance cameras. As he approached the gate, his steady surgeon's hands tensed on the steering wheel. A broad-shouldered figure stood in the shadows, military straight posture unmistakable even at a distance. Thomas's medical training kicked in as his eyes traced a distinctive scar, a clean, deep line running from the left temple to the right cheek. His professional assessment, definitely a knife wound, probably from military combat. "Can I help you?" Thomas called out, his finger hovering over the panic button on his key fob. The stranger stepped forward, his close-cropped gray hair revealing sun-weathered skin. "Dr. Bennett, I'm Marcus Stone. I'm here about the groundskeeper position." Thomas's eyebrows rose. He had placed the ad just yesterday, seeking someone to maintain the sprawling 5-acre property. "You're interested in the position?" "Yes, sir. I have experience with estate maintenance and landscaping." Something in Marcus's bearing, military precision mixed with quiet dignity, made Thomas pause. His initial instinct to send the scarred stranger away wavered. "Come inside. We'll discuss the details." Thomas surprised himself with the words. In his study, surrounded by leather-bound medical texts and family photographs, Thomas laid out the conditions. 3 months probation. You'll live in the guest house. No visitors. No alcohol. The property requires constant attention. Gardens. Pool. Boat dock. Winter snow removal. We have equipment, including a mini tractor for the snow. Can you handle machinery? Marcus's weathered face cracked a slight smile. "I've handled everything from tanks to tractors, sir. Won't be a problem." "Military background?" "Yes, sir. Special forces." Thomas nodded slowly. Years of reading people in high-pressure medical situations telling him to trust his gut. "When can you start?" "Immediately." Marcus extended his hand, his calloused palm meeting Thomas's surgical smooth grip. "And, Dr. Bennett, thank you for giving me a chance. Most people see the scar and show me the door. Well, Mr. Stone, as a surgeon, I know better than most that scars tell stories, but they don't define the man." Thomas gestured toward the window overlooking the estate. "Let me show you around your new workplace." As they walked the grounds, neither man could have guessed how their lives would intertwine, or that fate had already written a story far more complex than employer and employee. The Bennett name was synonymous with medical excellence in Boston's prestigious healthcare community. From the mahogany-lined corridors of Harvard Medical School to the cutting-edge operating rooms of Massachusetts General, the family's influence touched every facet of the city's medical establishment. Thomas sat in his private office at Bennett Surgical Associates, gazing at the wall of framed achievements. His mother's stern portrait, Dr. Elizabeth Bennett, head of neurology at Harvard Medical School, seemed to watch his every move. Beside it hung his father's distinguished image, Dr. Richard Bennett, chief of surgery at Mass General, serving as a daily reminder of the legacy Thomas carried. "Dr. Bennett," his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, "your mother's on line 1. Suppressing a sigh, Thomas replied, "Put her through." "Amanda." "Thomas, darling." Elizabeth's cultured voice filled the room. "Your father and I were just discussing your presentation at last week's surgical conference. Brilliant work on that experimental cardiac procedure." "Thanks, Mom, but I suspect that's not why you're calling." A pause. "Well, since you mention it, we had dinner with the Winters last night. Rachel asked about you." Thomas pinched the bridge of his nose. Rachel Winters, a brilliant pediatric surgeon with impeccable pedigree, but absolutely zero chemistry between them. "Mom, we've been through this." "Darling, You're 42. Your father and I aren't getting any younger. We'd love to see grandchildren while we can still enjoy them. The conversation was mercifully interrupted by Amanda. Dr. Bennett. Emergency in or 3. Gotta go. Mom. Emergency in the operating room. Thomas hung up and headed toward his sanctuary, the operating room. Amidst the sterile lights and the hum of monitors, he found clarity. It was a world of precision, one he could control. But outside the hospital, life was anything but predictable. Back at the estate, Marcus settled into the guest house. He worked tirelessly, transforming the grounds into pristine condition. His military efficiency and quiet demeanor quickly earned the admiration of Thomas and the household staff. However, beneath the surface, Marcus harbored secrets of his own. Secrets that would soon collide with Thomas's world in a way neither of them could foresee. As autumn settled over Boston, the estate became a target for something darker. One fateful evening, escaped convicts broke onto the property, seeking shelter and unaware of Marcus's presence. What followed was a night of survival, strategy, and courage. Marcus's special forces training came into full play as he protected the estate and its inhabitants. By dawn, the would-be attackers were subdued, and the authorities arrived. In the aftermath, Thomas stood beside Marcus on the lawn, shaken but grateful. "You didn't just save my home, you saved my family." Marcus's reply was simple. Family isn't always about blood, Dr. Bennett, but sometimes, blood has its way of bringing family home. For the first time, Thomas saw the scarred man not just as an employee, but as a brother in arms, a member of a family forged in trust and resilience. Together, they realized that the bonds they had formed through adversity were stronger than either of them could have imagined. To the main house, Thomas felt Marcus's words echo in his mind. "Your life is yours to live." For a man whose every step seemed predestined by the expectations of his powerful family, the thought lingered like a breath of fresh air. He adjusted his tie, steeling himself for the next wave of parental scrutiny. But something in him had shifted. Marcus's grounded wisdom, delivered in his usual understated way, struck a chord Thomas hadn't realized was so raw. The Sunday brunch resumed with Elizabeth Bennett's meticulous commentary on Boston society's latest goings-on, and Richard Bennett's occasional nods of agreement from behind his newspaper. Thomas listened passively, his mind still in Marcus's quarters, replaying their conversation in the rare moment of camaraderie. After brunch, as Thomas prepared to head back to his hospital office for the afternoon, Marcus intercepted him near the garage. "Dr. Bennett, the landscapers left the irrigation plans for you to review," he said, holding a folder. But as he handed it over, Marcus's gaze lingered. "If you ever need more than just a cup of coffee, you know where to find me." Thomas smiled faintly. "Thanks, Marcus. I might take you up on that." Later that week, Thomas found himself at the hospital late into the night, reviewing case files in his office. The city skyline glittered through the window, but its beauty felt distant. His phone buzzed again. Another message from his mother about an upcoming gala. "Rachel will be attending. Darling, she's looking forward to seeing you." He sighed and leaned back in his chair. For all his achievements, Thomas often felt like he was on a conveyor belt, moving through life in a direction he hadn't fully chosen. His family's expectations were suffocating, but their legacy was undeniable. How could he walk away from something so ingrained in his identity? A knock on the office door startled him. Amanda, his assistant, poked her head in. "Dr. Bennett, there's someone here to see you." Thomas frowned. "At this hour?" Before Amanda could answer, Marcus stepped into the room. He was out of place in the sterile environment of the hospital, his rugged demeanor a stark contrast to the polished world of medicine. "Marcus?" Thomas stood, surprised. "Is everything okay?" Marcus held up a small box. "Thought you might need a distraction," he said. "It's just chess. Figured you could use a break." Thomas chuckled, shaking his head. "You really know how to pick your moments." They ended up in the hospital lounge, the chessboard set up between them on a low coffee table. For the first time in weeks, Thomas felt his mind ease as they exchanged strategies and occasional banter. "You're not bad at this." Marcus said after a particularly clever move from Thomas. Could have been a soldier. Thomas raised an eyebrow. And you could have been a surgeon. Precision and patience, those are universal skills. Marcus hesitated, his hand hovering over a pawn. I suppose we all find our battles. Some just leave more visible scars than others. Thomas glanced at Marcus's face, the scar running from temple to cheek. Speaking of battles, you never did tell me how you got that. Marcus paused, his expression unreadable. It was a long time ago, a mission that went sideways. Let's just say I learned the hard way that not all wounds heal cleanly. Thomas nodded, sensing there was more to the story but respecting Marcus's boundaries. Well, whatever happened, I'm glad you made it out. You've got a way of keeping people grounded, me included. Marcus smirked. Some might say you're the one grounding yourself. Thomas, you just needed someone to remind you. A week later, Thomas found himself standing at the edge of the Bennett estate's sprawling rose garden. The fountain installation was finally complete, its cascading water catching the sunlight in shimmering arcs. Marcus was nearby, pruning a hedge with his usual military precision. Marcus, Thomas called out, walking over. Got a minute? Marcus set down his shears. Always. What's on your mind? Thomas hesitated, then said, I've been thinking about what you said, that my life is mine to live. I don't know why it's so hard for me to actually believe that. Marcus folded his arms, his gaze steady. Because you've spent your whole life living for everyone else? But you've got to decide. Thomas, what matters to you? Not your parents, not the Bennett's legacy, just you. Thomas nodded slowly, Marcus's words sinking in. For the first time in years, he felt like he had permission to ask himself what he truly wanted. I think, Thomas said, his voice firmer now, I need to start making decisions for myself. No more going through the motions. Marcus smiled, his scarred face softening. Good. That's the first step. As Thomas walked back toward the main house, a weight seemed to lift from his shoulders. The expectations, the pressure, the legacy, they would always be there. But Marcus was right. His life was his to live. And for the first time, he was ready to start living it. Straight at Marcus with an intensity that seemed unusual for such a young pup. The little dog padded over to the fence, her tiny tail wagging as she let out a sharp, confident bark. Looks like she's chosen you, Gloria said with a grin. This one's bold, curious, and fearless, traits you want in a guardian. Marcus extended a hand through the fence, letting the puppy sniff him. She nuzzled his fingers before playfully gnawing on them. For the first time in a long while, a genuine smile broke across Marcus's face. She's perfect, he murmured. Thomas, standing back and watching the interaction, couldn't help but smile as well. Looks like you've got yourself a partner. After completing the paperwork, they loaded the puppy into the car for the ride back to the estate. Marcus sat in the back seat with her, gently scratching behind her ears as she curled up in his lap. What are you going to name her? Thomas asked, glancing at them in the rearview mirror. Marcus paused, his hand resting on the puppy's soft fur. Nadia, he finally said. It means hope in Russian. Thomas nodded, the weight of the name not lost on him. Nadia it is. Back at the estate, Nadia quickly adapted to her new home. She followed Marcus everywhere, her tiny paws pattering across the garden paths as he worked. Despite her young age, she exhibited a natural protectiveness, barking at every rustling bush and unfamiliar sound. Marcus began training her immediately, teaching her commands and fostering her instincts as a guardian. Thomas often found himself watching the two of them from his office window. Marcus, who had seemed so hardened and reserved, had softened in Nadia's presence. She wasn't just a guard dog. She was a symbol of the new life Marcus was building, one rooted in peace rather than conflict. One crisp autumn evening, as Thomas returned from the hospital, he found Marcus and Nadia in the garden. The puppy was bounding through the fallen leaves, chasing a stick Marcus had thrown. The sight was almost surreal, a decorated soldier, whose life had been marked by hardship and loss, laughing as he played fetch with his new companion. Looks like she's settling in, Thomas said, stepping into the garden. Marcus looked up, his expression unguarded for once. She's a quick learner. Already knows the boundaries of the property. She's going to be a great protector. Thomas nodded. You've done a good job with her, Marcus. And with everything else around here, the place has never looked better. Marcus shrugged, his modesty intact. It's not just about keeping things tidy. It's about having something worth protecting. One night, weeks later, Thomas was jolted awake by a deep, resonant bark echoing through the estate. Nadia's alarm was unmistakable. Something was wrong. Throwing on a robe, Thomas hurried outside, where he found Marcus already on the move, a flashlight in one hand and a sturdy walking stick in the other. Nadia was at his side, her fur bristling as she growled toward the tree line. "What's going on?" Thomas asked, his breath visible in the cold night air. "Movement near the edge of the property," Marcus replied, his voice calm but focused. "Stay here." Ignoring the command, Thomas followed Marcus and Nadia as they approached the wooded area. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing two figures attempting to slip through the underbrush. "Stop right there," Marcus barked, his voice sharp and commanding. Nadia lunged forward, her bark ferocious enough to freeze the intruders in their tracks. They raised their hands, the glint of a crowbar visible in the moonlight. "We didn't mean any harm," one of them stammered. "We thought the place was empty." Thomas could see the panic in their eyes as Marcus stepped closer, his imposing frame and Nadia's snarls leaving no room for argument. "Get down on the ground," Marcus ordered, his tone brooking no disobedience. The men complied, and Thomas quickly called the police. Within minutes, flashing blue and red lights illuminated the driveway, and the intruders were taken into custody. The officers commended Marcus for his quick thinking and Nadia's keen instincts. As the commotion died down, Thomas turned to Marcus. "You saved us tonight," he said sincerely. "You and Nadia both." Marcus knelt beside Nadia, scratching her behind the ears as her tail wagged. "She did most of the work," he said with a small smile. In the weeks that followed, the incident became a topic of admiration among the staff and neighbors. Nadia was hailed as a hero, and Marcus's reputation as more than just a groundskeeper solidified. But for Thomas, the event was more than just a story of bravery. It was a reminder of how much Marcus had come to mean to the estate, and to him personally. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace with Nadia curled up at their feet, Thomas raised a glass of wine. To Nadia, "The best decision we've made in a long time." Marcus chuckled, raising his coffee mug, "To finding purpose in the most unexpected places." As the fire crackled and the room filled with quiet contentment, Thomas realized that Marcus wasn't just a part of the estate. He was a part of the family. And for the first time in years, the Bennett estate truly felt like home. "Secure," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the searing pain in his side. Bella growled low in her throat, maintaining her hold on the leader's arm, her eyes blazing with determination. The fourth man whimpered beneath her paws, too terrified to move. Thomas rushed to Marcus's side, his face pale as he took in the blood-soaking Marcus's shirt. "You're hurt," he said urgently. "I'm fine," Marcus grunted, keeping a firm grip on the shovel. "They're not going anywhere." In the distance, the wail of sirens pierced the air, growing louder with each passing second. Thomas crouched beside Marcus, his surgeon's instincts kicking in. "Let me see the wound." "Not now," Marcus insisted, his focus unwavering. "They need to stay down until the cops take over." Bella released a warning bark as one of the men shifted, her sharp teeth glinting in the moonlight. The leader, groaning in pain, glared up at Marcus. "You've got a lot of nerve, old man. And you've got a lot of bad decisions." Marcus shot back, his voice cold. "But at least one of us knows what they're doing." Moments later, red and blue lights bathed the estate as police officers swarmed the property. The convicts were swiftly handcuffed and dragged to their feet, their cocky demeanor replaced by sullen silence. Bella reluctantly let go of the leader, her tail wagging slightly as Marcus patted her head. "She's incredible," one of the officers said, nodding at Bella. "Where did you get her trained?" "She trained here," Marcus replied, his voice laced with pride. She's the best partner I've ever had." As the officers escorted the intruders off the property, Thomas turned his attention back to Marcus. "Now, let me look at that wound. No arguments." Marcus relented, sinking onto a nearby bench. He winced as Thomas lifted his blood-soaked shirt, revealing a jagged cut along his side. It wasn't deep, but it was enough to make Thomas frown. "You're lucky it didn't hit anything vital," Thomas said, his tone a mix of relief and irritation. "This needs stitches." "I've had worse," Marcus replied with a faint smile. "Maybe so," Thomas retorted, "but you're getting treated whether you like it or not. Come on." Back inside the estate, Thomas cleaned and stitched the wound with practiced precision, his hands steady despite his lingering adrenaline. Bella sat at Marcus's feet, her eyes never leaving him, as if she understood the gravity of the situation. "You didn't have to go that far. You know," Thomas said quietly as he worked. "You could have waited for the police and risked them getting into the house, risk them hurting you or anyone else." Marcus shook his head. "Not a chance." Thomas paused, his expression softening. "You put your life on the line tonight, for us, for this place." "It's my job," Marcus said simply. "It's more than that," Thomas replied. "You care, and that means more than I can put into words." As Thomas finished stitching the wound, Elizabeth appeared in the doorway, her face pale but composed. "I heard what happened," she said, her voice wavering. "Marcus, I don't know how to thank you. You saved all of us." "I just did what needed to be done," Marcus replied, his tone modest. Elizabeth stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You've given this family more than we could have ever asked for. You're not just an employee, Marcus. You're part of this family." In the weeks that followed, Marcus's actions became the talk of the community. The local paper ran a story about the incident, calling him a hero. Bella, too, became a celebrity of sorts, her bravery earning her a spot as an honorary member of the local K-9 unit. Despite the attention, Marcus remained humble, focusing on his work and Bella's continued training. For Thomas, the incident was a turning point. He saw Marcus not just as a protector, but as a friend, a brother. Even one evening, as the first snow of the season blanketed the estate, Thomas joined Marcus and Bella by the fire pit in the garden. The flames cast a warm glow over them as they sat in comfortable silence, the events of that fateful night seeming like a distant memory. "You know," Thomas said, breaking the silence, "I've always believed that people come into our lives for a reason. You've taught me more about loyalty and courage than I ever thought possible." Marcus looked at him, his scar catching the firelight. "And you've shown me that second chances aren't just a dream. They're real, if you're willing to fight for them." As Bella rested her head on Marcus's lap, Thomas raised his glass of wine. "To new beginnings," he said. Marcus nodded, lifting his coffee mug. "And to the family we choose." The snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in quiet serenity. For the first time in years, Marcus felt truly at peace, surrounded by the people and the dog that had given him a reason to hope again. Employee, Marcus. Family. Marcus's throat tightened, but he maintained his stoic composure, nodding slightly. "Thank you, Dr. Bennett," he said, his voice steady yet filled with unspoken gratitude. Thomas tilted his head, studying the exchange. Something about the atmosphere felt different, almost charged, but he brushed it aside. "Come on," he said, motioning toward the house. "Bella's not going to let you rest until you've given her some attention." Inside, the estate felt warmer, livelier than it had in weeks. Marcus took his usual spot by the window, overlooking the garden where Bella now darted between flower beds, keeping a watchful eye on her territory. Thomas handed him a cup of coffee, sitting down across from him. "You know," Thomas began, his tone light, "you've become something of a legend around here. People are still talking about what you did. You didn't just protect this house. You protected this family." Marcus glanced out the window, his jaw tightening. "It's what anyone would have done." "No," Thomas said firmly. "It's what you did, and we're lucky to have you." Elizabeth appeared with a tray of cookies, her demeanor unusually soft. Marcus, she said, sitting beside him. You've been through so much. I want you to know you're not just an employee here. You're family to all of us. Marcus looked at her, his normally composed expression faltering for just a moment. Thank you, Mrs. Bennet, he said quietly. As the weeks passed, the Bennet household settled into a new rhythm. Marcus resumed his duties, though he worked more cautiously to avoid aggravating his injury. Bella, ever the vigilant companion, rarely left his side, her loyalty unwavering. One crisp autumn evening, Marcus found himself standing on the balcony with Richard. The older man held a glass of scotch, his face lined with both age and the weight of unspoken truths. I've been thinking, Richard began, his voice low. You've made a life here, a home. I know what I asked of you, but if you ever change your mind, if you ever want him to know, Marcus cut him off with a gentle shake of his head. He doesn't need to know, he said firmly. Thomas is your son. You raised him. You gave him the life I couldn't. Richard's gaze softened. But he's your blood. And that's enough, Marcus replied, his voice steady. I'm here. That's what matters. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the estate in a warm, golden glow, Marcus felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. He had found his purpose, his place, not as a soldier or a man of vengeance, but as a protector, a guardian for a family that had become his own. Later that night, as the household quieted and the stars filled the sky, Thomas joined Marcus in the garden. They sat in silence for a while, the crisp air carrying the faint scent of autumn leaves. You know, Thomas said finally, I've been thinking about legacies. My parents have theirs in medicine. I suppose mine will be in surgery too. But I wonder, what's yours? Marcus looked at him, his face unreadable in the dim light. After a long pause, he said, my legacy isn't something you can put on a wall or in a textbook. It's here, in the moments that matter, protecting what's important. Thomas nodded slowly, sensing there was more to Marcus's words than he could fully understand. Well, he said, raising his coffee mug in a mock toast, here's to your legacy, Marcus. Marcus smiled faintly, raising his own mug. And here's to family, he said softly, as Bella patted over to rest her head on Marcus's lap. The three of them sat together under the starlit sky. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the warmth of newfound connections, Marcus knew that he had finally come home. Employee? Thomas was surprised by his parents' intensity toward Marcus. Well, look who's come around. Remember when you thought his scar made him suspicious? We were wrong about many things, Richard said quietly, his gaze steady. Marcus shifted his eyes away, uncomfortable with the weight of the moment. But we're making it right now. Over dinner, which was unusually hosted in the main house rather than leaving Marcus to eat in his quarters, Elizabeth made an announcement that caught everyone off guard. I've had the guest house renovated while you were in the hospital, she said, her voice warm with sincerity. New furniture, better heating, a proper kitchen. She paused, glancing at Marcus with a smile. And it's completely hypoallergenic, so Bella can visit whenever she likes. Thomas chuckled, shaking his head in amusement. Mom, you take antihistamines just to pet her now. Elizabeth shrugged lightly, sharing a glance with Richard. Some things are worth a few pills. Later that evening, Marcus stood quietly in the garden with Bella at his feet. The white dog rested her head against his leg, sensing the deep emotions swirling inside him. Through the illuminated study window, Marcus watched Thomas, bent over a stack of medical journals, a pen in hand, his focus unwavering. It was a picture Marcus had seen before, one that mirrored his memories of CLA. Thomas's mother, Richard, joined him silently, standing beside him in the cool evening air. It's harder than I thought, Richard admitted after a long pause, his voice laced with regret. Seeing him every day, knowing. No, Marcus corrected him, shaking his head slightly. The hard part was not seeing him for 28 years. This, he gestured toward the house. This is a gift. Richard looked down, his expression shadowed with guilt. You're a better man than I deserve, he said quietly. If our positions were reversed, you gave him everything I couldn't. Marcus interjected firmly. Education, opportunity, love. That makes you his real father. Inside the study, Thomas glanced up and noticed the two men standing in the garden. He waved at them through the glass, his face lighting up with a genuine smile. Both Richard and Marcus returned the wave, their shared secret like an invisible bridge between them. Marcus added softly, his voice thick with emotion. Besides, he has the best of CLA in him, that brilliant mind, that compassionate heart. I see her in him every day. Bella pressed closer to Marcus, sensing the weight of his words. Above them, stars began to sprinkle the darkening sky, silent witnesses to a moment filled with both grief and gratitude. Do you ever think of telling him? Richard asked, his voice tentative, almost hesitant. Every day, Marcus admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. But then I see him with you and Elizabeth. See the life he's built, the good he does. And I know, silence is my last gift to him. In the weeks that followed, life at the Bennett estate settled into a new, comfortable rhythm. Marcus continued his work as the groundskeeper, but the lines between employee and family had blurred beyond recognition. He was now a regular at family dinners, holiday celebrations, and quiet evenings spent in conversation. If Thomas noticed how Richard sought Marcus's advice more often, or how Elizabeth fussed over Marcus's health, he attributed it to gratitude for saving their home, their family. The truth remained unspoken, held tightly by two fathers who had learned to share a son in their own quiet way. And perhaps that was enough. This delicate balance of love, expressed not through words, but through presence, was a testament to the unspoken understanding they both carried. It was a bond forged in silence and strength, one that required no declaration, only quiet acceptance.